guys, Keith here. Version 2018.30 is out. I thought it would be an opportunity to go over some of the enhancements in the last few releases. So we're going to cover today versions 28, 29 and 30. No earth-shattering changes, a bunch of bug fixes, been very focused on bug fixes the last few releases, and I believe we've squashed a fair number of the significant ones. The number of bugs reports coming through seem to have dropped off significantly, which is a good sign. So let's go back to version 28. These have come out in pretty quick succession, partly because there's been a few anomalies that have come out as a result of it. I've been trying to significantly enhance the support for key bindings, the number of things that you can bind keys to, and also increase how those keys work. So make those keys work more frequently. It used to be that you had to have your focus in a very particular area in order for the key binding to work. And I've been trying to expand that a bit. Along the way, that's caused a few problems. A few keystrokes have been eaten up and not processed. And there's also been a couple of crashes where the programs tried to do things that previously you couldn't do, and that was causing a problem. Anyway, it's pretty good right now. So let's start with those changes to the key bindings. And there's a bunch of them. I'll try and cover them all at once. So the key bindings file, which you'd all be familiar with, has changed pretty significantly once you installed version 28. Each line's now got a lot more on it, and you've got a lot more control. So a couple of things. So first of all, you can now include the Alt key, the Control key, and the Shift key as modifiers. So rather than just having, you know, the 26 letters of the alphabet, a few numbers, and a few other special characters, you've basically got every combination of those with Control and Shift and Alt, obviously subject to it clashing with other things that your machine your particular operating system expects. So there's no point, for instance, linking Control Escape up. It's not going to do anything interesting on Windows because that key has a special meaning. The actual, the key significance, there's also a lot of extra key bindings in here. So what you'll see is there's a whole bunch of these where the key code is blank. That means that this key code, it's shown here in the key binding file, but there's actually no key assigned to this. But I've included them all in here so you know exactly which ones are available, and you can choose which ones that you want to introduce. I have slightly, I think, expanded the list. Maybe I haven't. Not in this version. I have slightly expanded the list of keys that are in here. There's a whole bunch of these toggle ones here, which allow you to toggle the display of the effect windows. So you can come in here and say, oh, look, Control F1, I want that to bring up the effect properties window, or the show, the model preview, or the house preview, etc. So there's a whole bunch of these commands in here. I'll run through a few of them. The wiring view obviously works on the layout panel and shows the wiring view for the currently selected model. You've got unlock a model and unlock an effect. This works on layout, this works on the sequencer. That allows you to lock them, stops you accidentally moving them. Toggle the element expand when you're in the sequencer. That'll expand or collapse the current row that you happen to be on. Stops playing. Show presets will show the presets insert dialog. You can set a toggle key up for that. Sequence settings will bring the sequence settings up. Search toggle will bring up the effect search bar or search dialog. The save sequence will specifically save the sequence, not save anything else. There is another one up near the top which will save the current tab, and that's set to Control S, so that no matter what tab you're on, you can press Control S and it will save that tab. Save the layout specifically saves the layout. Save as sequence obviously does the save sequence but prompts you for the name. There's a render all if you want to have a hotkey for render all. There's a play in loop which does the loop around playing. There's just the play button. the play button, this just plays. There is also a play toggle, which is set up to the spacebar key, which is what it's always been. Perspectives toggle brings the perspectives panel up. The pace by cell, pace by time toggles the toolbar icon at the top. Node layout, if you've got a model selected on the layout tab, it'll bring up the node layout dialog. Model preview toggle brings up the model preview or hides the model preview. Model distribute horizontal, in fact there's a bunch of these. These are a whole bunch of commands that you can associate with keys to control the alignment of models in the layout tab. Where something is applicable to the layout tab, you can reuse that key combination when you're in the sequencer. So if you say, oh, I'm going to use Control L for align left in the model the layout tab, you can still use Control L for something in the sequencer tab. It's smart enough to realize which tab you're on and it will decide which one to do. The opposite of the unlocks that we saw down here is the locks. So there's the two locks. The lights toggle, which turns lights on or off, the output to lights. Layer settings hides and shows the layer settings dialog. Layer blending hides and shows the layer blending dialog. The jukebox will hide and show the jukebox. Insert layer above and below. This is kind of cool. So when you're in the sequencer, you want to insert a layer directly below the layer that you're on. You just create a hotkey for that. There's a house preview toggle for showing and hiding the house preview. Group models, I kind of like that set to Control G. So if you've highlighted a bunch of models in the layout tab, press Control G and it will pop up and ask you to name the group of models that you've selected. Effect settings allows you to toggle the display of the effect settings dialog. The effect description allows you to put a description against an effect. I only know of one person that uses that, but there's a key now to do it. The effect assist toggle shows and hides the effect assist for things like morph and picture. Then there's a couple of effect alignment settings. The effects toggle will show, I think that's the effect dropper panel that it will show and hide. Display elements will show the display elements panel where you can add and remove models from your sequence. The color toggle shows the color panel, and close sequence obviously close the currently open sequence. These ones up here are all just mappings for existing key mappings in xLights. You can now override those and replace them with your own preferences. There's a couple of exceptions, things like F10 and F11. If you change this to, I know, F5 and F6, the F and 10 and 11 will still work, but the F5 and F6 will also work, so you don't lose anything. But if you overrode something down here and said, I want this to be F10, then the F10 would stop working. If you reuse the same key multiple times in here, it will take the first one it comes across, I believe, and use it, and it won't tell you. And that's about it. The other thing that's in here, so you've got all this stuff up here is the usual stuff for dropping effects on, which I know many people have customized in the past, and you can continue to customize it. There's also a new one down here where you can set the key binding type to be preset, and you can have as many of these as you like. And the effect name here, the GR here is the group name. So if you remember from presets, if you come into your presets here, you can create a group and you can put a preset inside it. Well, this is saying within the group, take the preset P, and when I press the O key with the Control key, it will insert that particular preset wherever I happen to be inside the sequencer. If you've got multiple layers of folders, then you would just have multiple here in the path to get to it. If you had the preset in the root folder, you would just have the preset name here. You wouldn't have any folder at the front of it. And the way it works is I can come over to here, and if I select here, press the Control O key, it inserts the preset. It's as simple as that. So yeah, so if you're a bit of a keyboard warrior and you like to have all of your hotkeys defined so you can do everything just on the keyboard, knock yourselves out. Let's see what sort of interesting key combinations you come up with. There's something to be aware of. Editing the key bindings file while you're running xLights, not such a great idea. When xLights closes, it will overwrite this file. So please make sure that you've got xLights closed before you go in and start editing this file. So yeah, so that was version 28. Lots of work went into that one. Allow timing mark creation after playback. You probably don't remember this, but if you previously were playing something and you press pause here, although it would show it here where it was paused, if you tried to insert a timing mark by pressing a T, it wouldn't actually work. I think it would try and insert the timing mark from wherever the start point was. Actually, I'm not even sure it would insert anything at all. But now when you press pause, you can insert a timing mark by pressing T. So I don't know about you, but sometimes I find I'm playing the song, I pause it, I think, okay, that's where I want to do something, and I can't insert a timing mark, and so I lose my place, and I've got to go back and do it about 6 times. So that's just trying to make that a little bit easier. You can, of course, also play, pause, and press the S key. Yes, the S key, I think. Yeah, and it splits the timing mark just like it always has. All right, so that's what that one's all about. Add a warning. Okay, so there is a setting that was added a few releases ago now called Save FSCQ on Save, and some people have been running around disabling that. That's a really bad idea. It's not the same as render on save. Render on save, I'm a big fan of turning that off. It takes a long time for it to render sometimes when you want to do a save, so rendering on save doesn't make a lot of sense. But when you turn off Save FSCQ, when you save, it means that the FSCQ file is not updated on disk. And so the next time you load your sequence, the sequence data is stale. It's not how it was when you closed xLights down last time. And that means you've got to go and run a render all. So you saved yourself writing an FSCQ disk, which doesn't take a lot of time, not compared to the render. And all it means is now you've got to do an extra render all the time. So it's not a great saver of time. I'm not a big fan of the option. So now if you turn that option off and you come up to tools and you run check sequence, it's going to give you this warning here telling you that you've turned it off, and it explains what will happen and why it's not such a great idea, etc., etc. So yeah, trying to forewarn people. I've had a couple of support cases now where people just didn't understand what was going on. They thought xLights was broken, and it's all because they turned that setting off. Not a great idea, guys. Yeah, don't do it. Add a link to Zoom in the help menu. So now for those of you who keep losing the Zoom link, if you come up here and click on Zoom here, it'll open up in your browser the same link that's on the xLights page and take you into the Wednesday night Zoom call in the US and the Friday night Zoom call here in Australia. So yeah, just a quick way to find that. Thank you to Kevin Smith for his ongoing sponsorship of that. Key binding support for presets, we went over that. Give the user some ability to influence the models, minimum model size created by generate custom model. Okay, there's actually been a couple of improvements to generate custom model for those of you who have been using it and maybe not had a great experience with it. So I'm going to quickly go through that again. So generate custom model is this process that you can go through where you stick your prop in a reasonably dark room, you come into this panel here, you run a test pattern on the prop, which you video on a nice steady video camera. You then take that video and come to the process tab here, and you want to process that video, and the way you would do that is it's a video, it's from nodes. We have to go and select the video files. Fortunately, I have a few of these that people have sent me over time. We'll go with this one. This one's always pretty good. We click next. The first thing it does is it will watch the video for about the first 15 seconds. So it takes a little bit of time. This runs a little bit slower than the rest of the analysis because it actually has to watch every frame. With some of the later analysis, xLights actually skips over frames, and that reduces the amount of processing that needs to happen. And so what it's doing right now is it's watching the first 15 seconds of the video, looking for those two bright flashes that occurred at the beginning of the video, because that's going to tell it that, hey, that's where the video starts. So you can see it's found that bright flash. It says it looks okay. How does it know it looks okay? Well, it saw two flashes. And because it saw two flashes and they were the right distance apart in time, it said, hey, that looks like it's right. I think we're all ready to go. And so we can come over here to automatic, and the change is this model scale. Currently it's set to 1, which is how it would have been in the past. And when it's set to 1, what it's going to do is it's going to generate the smallest possible model that would not result in those pixels overlapping each other in a custom model. But there's also been some other enhancements, not in this release, but in prior releases, which have fixed up some of the video watching to cause it to not lose itself as often and not create as many spurious pixels. So let's quickly run this. You can see it's going through the frames a lot quicker in this step of the process because it doesn't watch every frame. It knows whereabouts the lights should turn on, and so it only has to analyze those frames. And it's doing a great job on this video. I know because I've run this video 100 times. It's going to find every pixel. You will see some blue pixels on there. They're phantom pixels, ones that it found but rejected because it figured that it wasn't likely to be the right pixel. And it's gone through, it'll come to the end. We'll get an error, and the error occurs because it doesn't really know when the video finishes. And so it's kept playing the video for a number of frames and it hasn't found any more light. So it's saying, okay, I'm aborting the scan. That may be because it had a problem, or in this case, it happened because it finished. And now it shows me the original frame with all of the bulbs highlighted. And if I click on next, and I maximize this, you can see it's generated a nice tight model, largely determined by the spacing here in the middle. This is as small as it could make this model and keep everything in its right place. Now on this model, that's actually not a bad model. That's actually a really good model to use. But there are other props you will do where it will just be too aggressive, and I'll show you some of that shortly. So what you can also do is you can come back now and say, actually, no, that was too aggressive. I actually want you to scale the model up a bit. So that was a 40 by 38 model. Let's run it now. And you can see that the model size is already getting, well, it's not quite bigger than 40 by 38 yet, but it's going to be very soon. So it's creating a bigger model. Now the power in having a bigger model is obviously the pixels will be further separated, and that will make the model look more natural. So if you found that Generate Custom Model generated you models that were a little bit too compressed, a little bit too distorted, you can now increase this model scale. I suggest you don't go too high. If you go too high, you'll end up with a model that's absolutely enormous. And that's not necessarily a good thing either. So now you can see here that we've now got a model that is much, much larger. Everything is more separated. And, you know I did the big Boscoyo guitar, and in the old model, it generated a really tight model. Oh, look, it was the right shape and everything, but it didn't look great. And this enables that model to look great when it's done. So that's the changes to custom model generation. Okay, so there's also been some more general changes to custom models. So let's go back to the layout and generate ourselves a custom model here. And I'm going to create a very simple one to start with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the first thing you'll notice is you can now set the background image from within the dialog. Lots of people have wanted to get to the background image, and you used to have to get out of here and come back here and set the property here, which created a great deal of confusion, particularly as the brightness setting was in here. So I've duplicated it here now. You can come in here, choose your background image. Not sure I have any images. Do I have any images? I don't know, I'm not sure how these will work. Yeah, there you go. And so you can place the image in there, and if you click OK and come back to here, the image is set here as well. So just one less thing to worry about, having to go backwards and forwards for. All right, let's go back to our data. The other thing you'll notice on here is all the buttons that used to be here around flipping it and rotating it and all that sort of stuff are all gone. And the reason for that is I've actually moved them into a right-click menu here. So there's a cut, copy, and paste, but there's also things like horizontal flip, which flips those pixels over backwards and forwards. There's a vertical flip, which was also previously there, but it's now in the right-click menu. There's a reverse, which will make this pixel 5 and this pixel 1 and reverse the numbering order. So there you go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you wire it backwards and you need to reverse the pixels, you can come in and do that. There's also shift, and shift was always there. So this is a thing that says, oh, actually I need to shift all the pixels along. So I want to make one pixel 3, that will become 4, that'll become 5, that'll become 1, and then that'll become 2. And you do that by right clicking here, doing a shift and saying, I want to shift it 2 pixels along. And so 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. So it just moves all the pixels around. So particularly useful if you do a single string star, and you thought it was going to start at the end of one of the feet, but instead it's meant to start in the crotch of the star. You can shuffle all the pixels along. You can also shift it in both directions. So -2 is just as valid, and it gets us back to where we started from. So that's all the things that were there previously. But there are some other things that you can do. So one of the things you can do now, let's imagine that actually there weren't 5 pixels here. There's actually 6, and the one I missed out was the one between 2 and 3. So you can now come in here and say, insert space, insert prior, and I want to insert 1 pixel prior to pixel 3. And so it renumbers everything after it to 4, 5, and 6. And now I can go over and add my 3 pixel in, and I'm done. I can also come up here, delete this pixel because that was actually an incorrect pixel. And now I've got a problem because I've got a gap. The 3 is missing. So again, I can right click and click compress, and it will remove it. So this is quite powerful. So I can come in and get rid of 2 and 4 and come up and compress it. Oops. And it will turn it into 1, 2, and 3. So gets rid of any gap. So if when you're numbering it, you accidentally create 2 of the same number, or you accidentally miss a number and you want to compress all the numbers back down, you can now do it with just a right click. Really, really, really easy. The final one is the same tools that we used in the generate custom model. I've also introduced them into here. So first of all, let's imagine that we have a custom model that looks like this. Well, this custom model's obviously got some extraneous space around the outside of the model that we're not using. And so if you want to get rid of that extraneous space, there's now this trim unused space. It doesn't change the pixels themselves. They're all exactly where they were. It just got rid of all those blank rows and columns from the outside of the model. It didn't get rid of any blank rows or columns in the middle. So everything is still exactly where it was. Okay, let's go and download one of James's models, because the next one I want to show you is a little bit different. Oh, it would help if I selected it. And then it goes off slowly to the internet to go and get James's stuff. All right. So let's go and get it. Let's go and get the snowflakes. I've actually been playing with this one. I won't begin to describe how this model's all wrong, but it is. Anyway, so here we are. We have a model. It looks great. But if you look at the model, you can see that there seems to be a lot of empty space in it. What if I wanted to compress this down? I don't want to lose any pixels, but I want to make the buffer smaller because it's currently 83 by 87. That's a reasonably sized buffer. So let's shrink it so you can see it all. So what I've added is I've add these shrink space options. And the max 10%, what this will do is it will do a small amount of shrinking on the snowflake by up to 10%. Up to 10%, it'll never go more, it'll never shrink it by more than 10%, but it may not be able to shrink it by 10%. If shrinking it by 10% suddenly created pixels overlapping, it would refuse to do it. So it guarantees that won't happen. So if you do that, shrink it by 10%, you can see it's made the model a little bit smaller. It's made all the numbers a little bit closer together. The buffer is now 74 and 78 instead of 80 odd that it was previously. Pretty cool. You want to be a bit more aggressive? Well, we'll come back in again. Sorry, I went out just to reset the model back to what it was. Let's try and do it 50%. Much more aggressive. You can see that everything's got a lot closer together. There's a little bit of distortion. You get these on the arms here, you get the 78s kind of in an awkward space, not nicely separated. So it's starting to distort itself as we shrink it down. If we try it one more time, and we'll go with the 99% option. The 99% option basically shrinks the model to as small as it can possibly be without creating overlaps. So there it is. And you'll have to agree, that's a damn sight smaller. It's not 99%, 25, 27. It's about 25% in total. But you'll also notice that there's a bit of distortion, right? These arms here, they don't look straight anymore. They're a bit wavy, etc. But the model buffer is a lot smaller than the previous one was. And if you come and look at it, yeah, look, it doesn't look too bad. It's just a bit rougher. So if you'd really like your model buffers to be smaller for some of your custom models, there's now some tools there that will do it for you and help you get the outcome that you're after. So that's all of that one and that one. The final one I'll cover, I did have it open, it doesn't matter. So the final one I'll cover is for a long time now, we've had this update button up here on the color panel. And up until now, when you clicked on the update button, it wouldn't just update the colors on all the selected effects. So if I had a color wash, and that's red, white, and green, and I had a bars effect, and that's red, white, and green, and butterfly's not going to make any difference. Let's put a circles up. So if you'd previously selected all of this, come up to here and change this to I don't know, these three colors here, and it clicked the update button, it wouldn't just update these three colors, it would also copy across the brightness, the contrast, the sparkles, and so forth onto all of the models, which was not necessarily what you wanted. And it wasn't really necessary because these days, if you right click on these, there's bulk edit. So you don't really need the update to be applying all of those other settings as well. And so in 2018.30, I've changed it so the update button only applies the colors, the color curves, etc. It does not attempt to apply the sparkles and the brightness and the contrast. So it now acts like a true bulk update for the colors alone, not the whole panel. And given you can do everything else with the other bulk edit, I think that's by far the best outcome and really should free up your editing and make life a lot easier. So that's those 3 releases. There are a few enhancements in there, some things that are a little bit complex, and I'm sure there's lots of people who'll come up with some really interesting key bindings files. I hope you get a lot out of it. Thanks, guys. Thanks for your continued support, and I'll catch you later.